Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, November 22nd, and this week. What is this week? We have self-driving rules get relaxed, drivers go on strike, and Uber is launching a new service. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Brian Green. Brian, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back.
Yeah, great to be back. I forgot for a second what we're doing today. I'm going old school. I got notes. I don't have my tablet like usual, but we're gonna get through it. We're gonna do it.
I love it. I trust that you can do it.
It's not my first time doing this, you know. It's been
No,
a couple years of this. I think I can handle it. Yeah, interesting topics there. We're gonna jump right into it. We're going to start first with Trump's transition team is actually looking to help Tesla, and this comes from CNBC, and they reported, quote, Tesla shares jumped Monday following a report that President-elect Donald Trump's transition team is planning to make a federal framework to regulate self-driving vehicles a top priority for the U.S. Transportation Department. A federal framework for regulating self-driving vehicles would be a major boon to Musk's Tesla, which has been promising full self-driving vehicles for several years, but has so far failed to deliver a car capable of being driven autonomously without a human behind the wheel. So, Brian, this is an interesting play. Obviously, we know now that Elon is a part of his team. Elon has been touting that these cars are going to be ready, and it sounds like Trump's team is going to say, "Yeah, go with it. We're gonna let you fly through." So, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple ways to think about this. The first thing is these cars are coming sooner rather than later. We know that they're being tested in markets across the country. We know that Musk has been trying to get this going for a while, and other groups as well. Waymo and Uber and all these different companies are trying to get self-driving on the road. I like the idea that we're talking about regulation. I like that there's going to be a federal framework. We've talked before about the fact that I'm not sure the technology is quite there, but by getting the government involved, by laying out some guidelines, by making rules as to what these vehicles need to be able to do, what's expected of them, data that will likely have to be transferred to the government so that they can be monitored and hopefully improved with overview. Ultimately, I think this is exactly what the industry needs. It's going to be bumpy. There's going to be surely some tragedies which we've already seen as these cars take off. But I'm glad to see that the government is getting involved so that we can at least have the regulation, the rules in place that everybody knows what they need to meet, and we can work on achieving those goals in a safe, monitored way.
Yeah, I may be, I may be remembering this wrong, but I do remember during the pandemic with delivery specifically and what was happening with the pandemic and everyone trying to understand what to do and who can work and who not. It was a lot of chaos there, but I do remember that once the government stepped in and said, look, these are essential workers. Here's what gig workers can do. Here's what delivery can do. Here's also benefits. And I think there's even sort of an unemployment for those drivers. Like you said, it was bumpy, but it's smooth. It was really important for the government to step in and help, especially when innovation happens, instead of just a corporation saying, we don't care. I think ultimately this could be a really good thing. I don't know how Uber feels about it, though. I guess it depends on if they're going to work together or not.
Well, hopefully this would be regulation for all the self-driving entities. And I think Uber is going to be included in that. There's going to be self-driving cars that are on the Uber platform. They're going to have to make sure that the vehicles that they're putting out onto the roads, whether it's their vehicle or something that they're licensing from someone else, meets these standards. Ultimately, I think that it's important that we've got a unified framework in place. We need to make sure that there's not one set of rules in California and another set of rules in Texas and another set of rules somewhere else. These companies need to have benchmarks and need to have an understanding of exactly what's required of them. The goal can't be to be as least safe as the easiest market allows. It has to be as safe as possible with whatever the federal government is ultimately going to put in place. And I hope that the regulations are strong enough and have enough teeth that there's an incentive for these companies to demand excellence, to demand that their technology works, and to be held accountable if and when it doesn't. But I do like the idea of one unified set of rules, and I think that does need to come from the federal government rather than piecemeal state by state.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, I do believe, this is still early. Obviously, he's still president-elect. But it does sound like this is going to happen pretty quick, which I think it needs to. I mean, we're seeing the speed of these robo taxis and the Waymos already on the streets. So I agree. I imagine that we'll probably be covering this story in a couple months from now, and I'm sure we'll have some big updates on it. So, but definitely interesting stuff. So we're going to move on to the second story. Drivers in Newcastle have gone on strike, and this is from BBC. And they reported, quote, a group of Uber drivers have gone on strike in a row over pay and fee transparency. Changes made by Uber following a Supreme Court judgment in 2021 means drivers no longer know how much a customer has paid, only their fee, which they say is unfair. The court ruled Uber drivers should be considered employees, meaning they would be entitled to minimum wage and holiday pay. And now at the time, drivers would take payment from customers and pay the firm a set 25% fee. However, Uber has now changed this process to handle payments itself, forwarding a fee to drivers who have complained that there is no transparency over what share they receive. This is really interesting. I like covering news from outside of our country because to see what is happening out there, and especially with what Uber and Lyft do. But this is interesting, Brian. It seems like yet again they find loopholes, and man, they go for them.
I think that's exactly right. Uber and Lyft are very skilled at finding areas where they can get around the law. That's in a lot of ways how they started. They bullied themselves and bullied their ways into markets before the government had any chance to react. That's what they're doing to the labor market right now, where they're finding ways to not give workers what they would be entitled to if they were employees. They're finding ways to skimp on other sorts of benefits. We see that in the United States. We're seeing it abroad. And with this story, this is just another example. I love that the drivers are standing together. This is not a formal union, as it mentions. This is a group of drivers who have gathered together to voice their concerns and demand better. What was seemingly a good setup for them has been pulled away by Uber changing the rules, pulling the rug out from under their feet yet again. So it's a sad story in terms of drivers, in their plight that they've had with transparency and pay and just being able to earn a respectable living. But I do like that they're fighting for themselves, and that's ultimately how things are going to change. One market at a time, one country at a time, and hopefully Uber and Lyft are held accountable, and the courts come back into this picture and give drivers the rights that they're entitled to.
Yeah, and it says in this article, these drivers don't have a formal union representation. But also, I think you had brought this up before. Uber is very good at seeing how far they can push something until they get reeled back. So hopefully, like you said, yes, hopefully the courts say, look, you're overstepping your boundaries here to be doing this stuff, or they just or someone just sues them and they say, okay, fine, we'll back up. Right. It's unfortunate that they're always there's always seeming to try to find a way to screw the driver. And it would be nice for once that it's just fine. You win, you get what you deserve. I don't know why that's such a tough thing.
Yeah. Well, just, briefly, in the law, we talk about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And what Uber's really good at is looking at the letter of the law and figuring out how to get around the spirit of the law. So when the court decided that drivers were entitled to certain things, they spelled it out. They said, this is what drivers are entitled to. This is how it's supposed to go. This is what the law states. Then Uber analyzes that opinion and says, oh, well, they didn't say this, so we can go around this, this back corner here. We go through this door that they didn't close. Yeah. So Uber just continuously finds ways to act within the law, quote unquote, but obviously contrary to the spirit of it.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think you nailed it. And then they can throw their hands up and say, well, we're not breaking the law. You
Right.
didn't say this, so we can do it. It's sort of like I'm not screwing you over. So
like dealing with a toddler.
right, exactly. Yikes. All right. Well, to our final story, Uber is launching a new service called XXL. This is from Business Insider. And they reported the ride-hailing company's new ride category comes with, quote, access to larger trunk space, and announced Wednesday. So what is the difference between this and an Uber XL, which has been around for years? They say it boils down to trunk space. The Uber XL option gives riders a van or SUV that seats up to 6 people, while the new Uber XXL choice guarantees trunk space and fits 6 people. It's worth noting the Uber XXL option is only for trips to and from airports. It's also available for more than 60 airports worldwide, including 40 in the U.S. and Canada. I'm actually a personal fan of this, especially for, formerly I worked in TV and production. Man, I would have loved this back then. So I'm all for it. I think this is much needed.
Yeah, I think this is a cool idea. It's ultimately more options are better, and we've got drivers who are driving around in big vehicles and perhaps can make some more money with this feature if the rider needs a special type of vehicle with a big trunk and lots of space for passengers. Great, like let them charge a little bit more. Let's put some more money in that driver's pocket. And certainly there's a need for it. I know I can think of a couple of years ago, I was going on a trip with several friends. We all wanted to take one Uber. We've got a bunch of luggage. Like this would have been perfect. And,
Right.
the option didn't exist. We had an XL coming. And I just remember it was very tight. So,
Yeah.
this isn't the
Yeah.
biggest news story in the world, but I certainly think it's a feature that can be useful to both riders and drivers alike.
Yeah, and you know what would be interesting? I'm sure they probably won't do a story on this, but I would love to know in a year from now, and maybe there already is one about the XL, tipping. I think that's really crucial because this is a little different. Like you said, it's you and 5 of your bros, right? And you're piling into a van. There's a lot of luggage. If the driver's helping you, you're gonna tip the guy, right, or the gal. And I'd be curious to see if there is an uptick in tips on services like this. I think that'd be a fascinating research.
Yeah, I would imagine yes, because people are viewing this as more of a service rather than a quote unquote taxi. So I think there's a mindset shift when it comes to the bigger vehicles and traveling to and from airports, and you could just think of all sorts of scenarios. So I would bet that tipping is up on these sorts of rides and with these vehicles. But as you mentioned, I'd love to see the data,
Yeah.
which I'm sure people will not share with
Which,
us.
I was gonna say, which we are sure they will absolutely not share or tell us anything about what we just thought would be interesting. It's the way it goes. Well, that's our stories this week. But Brian, I'll give you the last say before we head off into the weekend and my birthday weekend. So, pretty excited about that.
I didn't even know, Jared. Happy birthday.
Yes, thank you. Monday. Well, technically Monday, I guess, is my birthday, but I'm going to pretend it's the weekend.
Well, I mean, celebrate this weekend like it is. So
Yes.
the great happy birthday to you.
Yes.
Anyway, before we take off for the big birthday celebration, I'd like to remind everybody that it is important to give us a call if you ever find yourself in an accident or injury situation, driving for rideshare, as a passenger in a rideshare vehicle, anything gig related. We're going to give a free consultation. We're going to explain how to maximize the value of your claim, what you need to do to protect your interests, get things like medical bills covered, wage loss recovered, pain and suffering, any other damage that you sustain, we're going to help you collect for that. LegalRideshare.com is the best way to find all of our contact information, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.